Okay, welcome to the Cosmic Weather Report with astrologer Sue Rose. We have a very, very fun and exciting, playful show today because I'm going to preface this with saying Sue Rose knows nothing about cryptocurrency. I've asked her to maybe pick up a few charts and do some reading. So she's going to do a comparative of some coins she knows nothing about. So a lot of her responses to the comments that I might make will shock her or may make her laugh or whatever because she doesn't know anything about these currencies. So, but the important thing to note is that the reason why we're talking about cryptocurrency is because the Cosmic Weather Report is all about the current landscape. And as you know, as we've been talking about, we are transitioning from Piscean age to Aquarian age, and this is the perfect example of an Aquarian thing, right?
It really is, because it's a paradigm shifting entity. Well, let me go back to something else so viewers understand the logic here. You know, the word astro-logic is a metaphysical logical system. You can make a chart for a human baby. You can make a chart for a nation. You could make a chart for a corporation. As a matter of fact, Wall Street has plenty of astrologers who chart the progress and the downturns in corporate entities. So when Candace said, would you like to try cryptocurrencies? I said, well, I guess it'll work because each time an entity becomes born, which is to say it becomes an inception, an entity, it gets a chart. And anything with a chart can be charted, which means we look at where the planets were at the moment of inception or birth. And we say, does it look good? Does it look tough? And then we can also look at it up the road, like what's going to happen 5 years from now, 10 years from now. And that's based on where the current planets are. We call that transits, compared with, and it's all based on geometrical angles, the original blueprint or the original chart.
Okay, so now if we look at the difference between the Piscean financial market and the Aquarian financials.
Well, the Piscean age is basically the last 2,200 years. So it was established monetary systems, which were supposed to be tied to things like gold and silver. But then it became a sort of, I have to say, a farcical market of, what do they call that? Currencies that are decoupled from anything that's real. So I think that's what gave rise to the geniuses. Aquarius is genius, innovation, the inventor, the iconoclast, the person who's going to be cutting edge and break the rules.
Yeah, would you say it was a disruptor?
A disruptor, yes. Uranus, which rules Aquarius, is the most disruptive planet. It literally knocks over the apple cart. So the development of these cryptocurrencies are a kind of challenge to the old financial system. That's where the premise of Pisces is the old institutions, some of them I think, again, based on fiction, fiat money, they call that, are transitioning into this other method of currency, which is going to probably eventually take down the giant.
Yeah. I think a lot of people expect something like that, or at least some sort of hybrid version.
Yeah, hybrid's a great word.
That can level playing field for a lot of people.
Average people. When I look at a chart, and this is something, I mean, I have 40, 50 years of chart interpretation, themes come to me because I'm a former English teacher. So there was one of them that the theme rang out that it was meant to serve humanity and have broad humanitarian altruistic goals, and that's the Kishu Inu one.
Oh.
You know?
Really?
Yeah. I mean, everything about
so
it
wait,
was in
wait,
the
hold-
11th house, which is the Aquarius house. Say it again?
Well, we're just jumping right into this,
Yeah,
right?
we are kind of jumping, aren't we?
Okay, wait. First, let's do this disclaimer now. We are not financial
please,
advisors.
please.
We're not financial advisors. Sue's not a financial advisor.
Not
She
at
knows
all.
nothing about cryptocurrency. This is an objective astrological view.
Right.
And everybody needs to do their own research and do their own investments and take their own risks, frankly.
Exactly.
Okay? All right. So now I'll ask the question, who's jumping out at you? Wait.
Well,
Let's
okay,
say who
you
we're
gave
reading.
me five
Yeah.
entities, 5 cryptos, none of which I've ever even heard of. And then I charted them because you had dates and times and places of birth, which are really the quintessential trio to do an accurate birth chart. So when I did the charts, obviously I put all the planets in, and I imagine you're going to show this later to go with the podcast. And then I looked at, I said, where are the strong suits? Where are the weak suits? And I would come up with themes. I could tell you what my favorite one is.
Yeah.
I wrote
Who
down,
jumps out
Well,
at
I
you?
wrote real potential for METAMOON. And I like SAFEMOON. And I also do the numerology on these based on the birth date. And that's a real hybrid there. The date of any entity into its I Ching 64 qua hexagram equivalent. SAFEMOON is progress. So it definitely is pointing, on a numerological, and then it's the only one that has a grand trine, which is the best possible aspect in astrology between three of the same element.
She has a
and
big
this
red
element
star on
happens
it.
to be Earth, which is the element of business and money and tangible resources and assets. So I really, SAFEMOON was the one I liked the most. I could say what I thought about one of them that kind of like freaked me out when I saw it, because it was like, man, this looks like a spy operation to me. And I could be wrong. I mean, astrology has certain, assumptions based on what the signs mean. Scorpio, one of Scorpio's meanings is the underworld. So that could, of course, be the dark web. But the underworld also means spycraft and a lot of the military covert operations. So in one of the charts, I'm looking for it right now, that was the thing that jumped out at me. It just seemed to be saying, wow, this looks like some kind of psyops, some kind of bringing up things that it almost looks like it was created to spy on people that are doing stuff that are covert.
So do you want to say the name of what that one was?
Am I allowed to?
Oh yeah.
XYO. So why do I say it? Because Mars is in Scorpio, which is the sign ruled by Pluto, and Mars is the military, and Pluto is, again, this underworld. And Mars is exactly conjunct. We're talking about a zodiac of 360 degrees. So the probability of these two outer planets being exactly on the same zodiac degree, which is 17 degrees Scorpio, and Jupiter's where you make your money. And Scorpio could be even like mafia, people that do hit jobs. It's the sign of death. It's the sign of mob rule. Another reason I said it was there are 3 planets in Capricorn, which is the sign of government, and it involves Pluto again. Venus is at 15 Capricorn. The Sun is at 15, 16 Capricorn. That's, again, a real tight squeeze there. They're almost on the same zodiac degree out of 360. And there's Pluto, the ruler of Scorpio, at 18 Capricorn. And the whole Pluto Capricorn is this idea of government controls. We saw it with the war on terror. Now there's a tremendous surveillance net. Everybody's, acts are really being recorded on the internet, on cell phones. Edward Snowden blew the whistle on that, and he's hiding in Russia as a result. But the bottom line is, we're all under surveillance. That's very, very Scorpio. Even when I was in high school, it was the Scorpio guy that was the first to get the VCRs and the interesting audio equipment. And, whenever I saw movies, like there was one called The Conversation with Gene Hackman done 30, 40 years ago. That was his job, to spy on people. But in those days, they used tape recorders. It was a much, much different operation. Now everything we're saying is in the ethers and being recorded.
So do you want to know what XYO's technology is about?
I have no idea. What is it?
Okay, it's geo-mining locations.
What does that exactly mean?
So tracking.
Tracking what? Mining?
Anybody.
So it can be a spy thing, right?
That's exactly.
And it could be government wanting to know what's going on, because they don't want a threat to the old currency systems, do they?
No. So also, and you mentioned sex trade as well.
Yeah, I know. I got to say it. Sex trafficking.
So they've partnered with some sex trafficking companies.
They partnered with them?
Well, they partnered with them in the sense that they can help locate people who have been sold into the sex trade.
Can you believe this is happening in the 21st century? People say it's human nature, and I say bogus BS. It's because Mars, the dominant archetype of I'll hit you over the head with my club and I'll take your body and everything you own, is still given precedence. And I said it in the last podcast. Far too much of our global shared resources go to militarism, soldiers, war, weaponry. If this were distributed among the other 11 archetypal components of the zodiac, we would have a much better world. It has nothing to do with human nature. It has to do with a particular dominant archetype that's basically said to the rest of us, line up, shut up, and we'll tell you how to live. I mean, look at the way indigenous people were stolen from their families and given a kind of cultural reorientation process. It happened in the U.S., it happened in Canada, it happened in Southeast Asia, like in places like Thailand and probably Singapore. Everything was codified to fit the white Anglo-European male model, which is essentially Mars, the warrior.
Okay, so is there anything in the chart that
redeeming?
Yeah.
Well... it's interesting because, Aries is a sign of warfare and Uranus is in Aries. So it's basically saying there's a kind of a different approach to warfare, or a more disruptive possibility to the old models of warfare. But is there anything redeeming? Well, there's a potential for compassion, and maybe that's saving people from that sex trade thing. Because Neptune is in the 6th house, and the 6th house is about your work for humanity. It's the Virgo house based on duty, fixing, healing, cleaning up messes. And Neptune does at its highest. Remember, that rules Pisces. There's two fish there. One is absolute deception, but the other can be high states of compassion. So maybe that's the only redeeming thing. But the chart has the moon in Virgo, which is really anal retentive about details. It's in the 12th house, which means nobody's going to really know what's going on. That's the house of, real subterfuge. And that moon in Virgo is literally opposite to Neptune in Pisces.
It's very precise location, so you could literally, like, if you lose a package, know exactly what's happened or who's stolen it.
Okay.
Do you know what I'm saying?
So it's a tracing methodology.
It's certainly tracing, and you can have it on your phone, and, you could map the world with it.
I think people are going to use it for more nefarious purposes.
Yeah, so it sounds like it obviously...
It's really a nefarious chart.
Even
if the moon in Virgo opposite Neptune says there's a lot of mixed motives involved in the operation. Now, what we say is if we have a good time of birth, and I trust you on the times you gave me, then Libra, which is supposed to be justice-oriented, rises. We say, who's the ruler? Who's the governor of Libra? The answer is Venus. So we say, where is Venus in this chart? And we find that, Venus is in Capricorn near the sun, which would be good by itself. But then there's that Pluto, which means overall government control. Somebody's watching you. Do we trust in authority? And I think because we recently had Saturn, Jupiter, and Pluto all together in Capricorn, there's been a lot of mistrust. It's been earned in authority figures. And so they have so much power right now. And that's what Edward Snowden was trying to tell people. Anybody can use your secrets against you. That's why I talked about, the founder of Scientology in the last podcast, because just like the Catholic Church in the use of confession, if you know somebody's secrets, you can manipulate them. And the whole idea of all this spying is a lot of dirt is found on politicians and everybody else. Remember, it used to be that it's called the honey trap when they get some insecure male, high up guy to have sex with some beautiful girl in a foreign country, and she'd have all the goods on him. And then they would use that to get him to do foreign policy according to whoever sponsored the operation. Yeah. So I think that the propensities to that kind of dark use are really high right now. The Aquarian energies are trying to break through with truth and altruism and concern for our fellow mankind, but it's still a slow birth process.
Yeah. I mean, I guess so potentially you could have these tracking devices on your soldiers and your military, so should anybody get left behind or anybody get lost,
would be good for that purpose.
It'd be great for that.
I think it's because you're a being of light, so you're bringing light to the equation. And that is always a possibility.
I think yes. I think always
lost children.
Good tools will be used for bad things.
That's
as well
exactly
as good.
right.
Like this is a good tool. It's a very good thing. Can be used for great things. But
it's also a powerful tool, and it's like where the Bible says money itself is not evil, but the love of money. And, the love of a misuse of power is, I think, an issue with that particular one.
Yeah.
But you're right. It could always have a positive application. And I think it looks to me, and again, I have absolutely no understanding of these things, but just from the astrology archetypes, which do tell the story, it looks like the reason it was created was, in fact, to chart what's going on under the radar. So let's call that the dark web or operations that are, underneath the normal radar of society.
That's interesting.
That's how I see that one.
That's actually pretty interesting. Okay. All right, so let's move on.
Well, let's go to my favorite one, so we'll bounce around.
Yeah.
First of all, I like the name SAFEMOON. Moon is very yin. It's got a feminine vibe. I do the numerology, and this one is 35 in the I Ching, which happens to be my own number, so of course I like it. But it's called progress. So the implication is that, it's going to progress. The other thing that was really, really powerfully positive about it is if you get a trine, which is like loaded bases in astrology, your first base is your first expression of an element, second base the second, and the third, then you can hit a home run, hypothetically. So it's kind of rare to have grand trine in anything. And in the SAFEMOON one, we got the Pluto at 26 Capricorn. Anything in the last few years is going to have Pluto Capricorn because it was there it went in 2005-06. It stays till 2024. With a 248-year orbit, Pluto can stay anywhere from 12 to 28 years in a sign. Average is about 20. The reason for the difference is it's an elliptical rather than perfectly circular orbit. So that's why the 12 divisions are not equal. And then the moon is also in Virgo. So both of them have the moon in Virgo. Now that could be because Virgo is all about the codification of information. This is interesting what I'm going to say right now. The ancient people only knew of 7 planets. So when the last 3 were developed, they came to represent signs that used to be shared with another planet. So there was a time where Jupiter ruled both Sagittarius and Pisces, when Saturn ruled both Aquarius and Capricorn. Well, Mercury, the winged god of commerce and communication, still rules Gemini, which is the sign where communication itself is developed, as is commerce and mercantilism, but it also rules Virgo. But Virgo is where it's more precise. Virgo is the codification of information, lists and files. You know, the joke is you used to have to use the yellow pages or the Dewey Decimal System at the library. Today, you just hit Google or whatever other search engine is out there. So it's interesting that the two of them have the moon in Virgo. That's 2 out of 2 so far.
When you say to XYO and SAFEMOON so
Correct.
far. Okay.
But the difference here is that it's trine. The moon is trine to Pluto, which is the best possible angle in astrology. A trine is like, if you think of music, if you hit 2 notes on the piano next to each other, it sounds terrible. It's cacophony. You go one more note, you get harmony. The Fibonacci series was based on this with plant architecture. Like I forget who did it. I think it was Kepler, but I forget who was the scientist who did this. But he basically tied a string from one branch to the next branch to the next branch, marked the string, and it was mathematically perfect, the distance between the branches. And it's like that, you know, in music, you have to have a certain distance between notes to make harmony. So the most harmonic angle in astrology is the trine. And then the last one is the Mars. You'll like this in Taurus. I think you have Mars in Taurus. But look at the degrees. The Pluto is 26, the Moon is 23, and the Mars is 27, 28, which means they're really within the range of a perfect trine. And it's in Earth, which means you put the seed in the ground. If it's fertile, it's going to grow.
So this is probably a good, solid, long-term
That's what it looked like to me.
project.
I've never invested in anything like this in my life, but if I were, it would be probably this. Now, another thing is it's got a packed, P-A-C-K-E-D, packed second house. The second house represents Taurus. It's the house of banking and investment and resources. So there's tons riding on it. Now, when you have 5 planets packed in there, they're not all going to be good. There's probably not 5 totally benefic or beneficial planets in the zodiac. You've got Mercury, the ruler of mercantilism. It's in Aquarius, the avant-garde sign of new types of trades. You've got Jupiter. That's the money planet. That's the prosperity planet. But Jupiter is close to Saturn. Saturn is right on the border. It's not quite in that second house of money. It's in the first house, which is the one that says put the brakes on. Don't rush in, like a ram with your horns first.
That's a good thing.
Yeah. Then it's got Venus. Venus rules money. Venus is accidentally exalted in the second house. What that means is she rules Taurus, the natural ruler of the second house. The sun, which is a great beneficial influence. The only negative is Neptune, the ruler of Pisces, which is the planet prone to deception. Now, the question the astrologer would ask is, what is stronger here? You got 4 pretty good influences and one that could be either way. Neptune could be either fish. So I imagine some people could get swept up in a kind of Neptunian tide. And also we do have the moon opposite the Neptune. Wasn't that also true in the other one? I think we had it in the other one too. Well, you know why that is? Because Neptune basically, they both have the moon in Virgo, and these things have been conceived in the last several years. So they're basically close together in terms of their birth times.
Oh, interesting.
You know, the other one, which was XYO, had moon at 13 Virgo, opposite Neptune at 12 Pisces, because it was born in 2018. Neptune stays in a sign for 14 years. And this one, because it also has moon Virgo, a little later at 23 degrees, is opposite Neptune at 20 degrees. I think what it's saying, if this happens more than 2 times out of 5, then it's saying that that's the pattern in general, because the moon represents the public's appetite. And Neptune means the fantasy, the illusion, the imagination, what is possible here. And it kind of is a leap of fantasy, isn't it? Because it's not yet real in the sense that we think of actual tangibles. But, this is the chart I would personally bet on, because it's got such a packed second house, which is the money house. Neptune is going to be hitting any of these. I think it's going to have some ups and downs, because the Saturn in Aquarius, 8 degrees Aquarius, does square Uranus. That's the shock planet. It's not going to be a smooth sail.
Right.
And
Well, we have regulation coming in, so at some point people are going to have to face the regulatory tide.
That could be what that is.
So you want to know what this project is?
Okay.
It's an exchange.
What do you mean by that?
It's where you would go and buy and sell and trade cryptocurrency. They're making a decentralized version of that so that anybody can swap with anybody.
Like a giant bartering system?
Yes, in a way. Yeah.
Can you barter an activity like I do house painting for a tangible?
No, there's no real world assets. It's only cryptocurrency. Like you could say, well, I've got XYO. I trade my XYO for your SAFEMOON, and you swap them.
Okay, so it's like sort of a Wall Street trade with these cryptos.
Except you're doing it with people.
Real people.
Everyday people, investors.
That's interesting.
Yeah.
I think
there's no middleman.
If we see Because again, so much is based on fiat currency, like they print the money and hand it to the bankers who then inflate the stock market and buy out all the real estate. It's quite a scheme, boy. Eventually, I feel like that's going to have to implode because I think, to me, it's based on fallacy. It's not based on anything true. Again, Piscean age. So I think these will be fallbacks. And then it probably would be a good idea to have some of these other things.
Well, the important thing would be to realize is because there is very strong regulation coming down the pipeline now. And, it's looking like certain exchanges and banks are going to have to go through regulatory paperwork, especially in the United States. And so there are going to be those places that just aren't going to make it because they're not going to be able to get through the paperwork. And it sounds like a chart like that is especially with the due diligence of Virgo in there.
Good point.
And the Grand Trine.
I love the
Solid
Grand Trine.
and Saturn, no rush. We're just going to keep going.
Yeah, and this is the one I like.
Yeah, that they would be able to steadfast get through something like that.
Plus the numerology of progress.
And progress. Right. Okay, so that's a good overview of SAFEMOON. So who else, what else stands out?
Okay, so what I wrote in my notes on SHIBA Inu, which is born August 1, 2020, is I see legal battles, government control imposition on this one, lots of conflicts in this chart. Those were my notes to myself. Okay, why does she say that? Cancer rises, which means that it's ruled by the moon, and the moon is in Capricorn, which is always a sign of slow, painstakingly slow things. There are 3 other planets in Capricorn. 4 planets in the chart are in Capricorn, which is a sign ruled by Saturn, and 3 of them are in the house of partnerships. That's the 7th house. It's also the legal house. We have Saturn and Jupiter. Remember, they're opposites. Saturn is the Old Testament, as ye reap ye sow, very karma-oriented. Jupiter is growth, optimism. All you have to do is believe and wish on a star it's going to happen. And there's Pluto smack in the middle. And Pluto is kind of like, that powers structures of the government putting its breakdown. The other reason why I found that to be problematic is Mercury rules trades. Mercury is mercantilism, marketing. Mercury rises in Cancer at 22 degrees, smack opposite that trio in Capricorn. That's some hard stuff. That's like trying to run with a ball and chain. Is there anything redeeming, as you would say? The Mercury trines Neptune, which is highly intuitive. And if this one did things like, help with hospitals or healing or anything to do with, that would be the one way out of the problem, because the Neptune, which is about ultimately compassion, it literally rules hospitals, jails, and institutions, including drugs, detox, hospitals, anything to do with healing centers. The Neptune favors the 3 Capricorn. Earth and water go together, and the Neptune also favors the Mercury. So the Neptune is the bridge between these oppositional parties. And, Neptune can be illusion and deception, but it can also be the highest level of compassionate care.
Interesting.
The sun is in the 2nd house, which does mean it hypothetically could make money, but the sun is sitting all by itself. It makes no aspects. It's all by itself. That's not a good sign in astrology.
So this one currently now is also similar to SAFEMOON in that it's an exchange and a swap. But they're growing into creating their own blockchain, which I'm not sure how it would be adopted beyond that, but it would be a part of the infrastructure of the overall, like we have the internet. I
still see some legal issues on this one.
Well, I think they have to go through, everybody's going to have to go through regulation and legality.
I don't think this is going to be so smooth sailing.
But you want to hear something interesting you said about compassion, about healing?
Yeah.
They had, 100% of the supply that was released into the public, but 50% of that supply was given to one single wallet, and that was to one of the founders of Ethereum, which is like a granddaddy of cryptocurrency, to this man. And when India got into trouble with COVID and people got really, really sick and there was no funding and no vaccination. So he gave
that? Really good karma.
He gave it.
Oh, that totally fits.
Not the entire thing, but he gave
but
like 10% of that 50%, which is about $32 billion.
Really, that much?
But no, SHIBA had run up to a certain price. And
How do you like that?
And so, but across the board, like it was 5 different organizations that he had given the money to.
So it totally fits where Neptune is. Okay, but there's one other thing I don't really love, and that is Gemini is a sign ruled by Mercury, okay? So Gemini is the sign that governs the marketplace. It's all about talking things up. That's why communication, the salesman prototype. And Venus, which is the money planet, is in Gemini in this chart. It's in the 12th house, which again, hospitals, jails, institutions, 12th house has a connection to the sign of Pisces, and thus Neptune, its ruling planet. But the Venus is at 23-24 Gemini squaring, that's the hardest angle in astrology, the Neptune. There's a couple of things this could mean. It could mean tremendous conflict of interest among the people involved. And it also could mean deception, as in financial fraud.
Okay.
It really can mean that. And what I think is, because they're both mutable signs, meaning double signs, Pisces is 2 fish, Gemini is 2 twins, there's going to be some people involved in this that are going to have very high principled motives. And there's going to be others that are going to see this as a means to an ends. I can't tell you who wins that battle.
I think that is very accurate. I've seen some discussions between the developers and the teams because it's a highly decentralized team. They don't even know half the people they're working with.
High propensity to fraud here.
And so the starters of it do have that light bearing that you're talking about, the very intuitive, very compassionate.
I think it's going to split into 2 groups.
Very interesting.
Like mitosis in the microbe kingdom. Yeah, I think it's going to have to split. I think this is going to be almost like a quintessential battle between the dark side and the light. All right, so Kishu Inu, this one looked like it really had some positive, lofty goals. It's interesting because we're seeing parallels. This one has the moon in Cancer, which is opposite the moon in Capricorn on the Kishu Inu one. The other 2 both had the moon in Virgo. So there are some similarities popping up. If you look at the chart, there's nothing in the money houses. So it seems like this is really more about, and it's got a packed 11th house. The 11th house represents Aquarius, the 11th zodiac sign, the idea of a better world. So I put a heart on it. Like it should have heart-centered goals, things that are basically, I don't know if this is an investment in things that help the planet's ecology, new kinds of agriculture, desalination of water, because a lot of places are going to be getting droughts that didn't have that problem before. There's going to be, necessity is the mother of invention. A lot of necessities knocking, and that's not going to be stopping. That's almost like, a rhyme there. The only negative I saw here is that Mercury, which again is the mercantilism planet, it's in Aries, which means I want to be first. I'm going to be first to get to the place to put my flag down and mark it as my territory. It squares Pluto. Now, what that means is people aren't going to know what's going on because Pluto is also in the 8th house, which is the house of Scorpio, secrets. But this could just mean whoever plans it behind the scenes is going to have their game down.
Yeah, they're not talking.
Right,
yeah.
Exactly. But the Mercury does favor Jupiter, and Jupiter's the money planet. And guess what? Jupiter's rising at the top of the chart. So that means there's going to be financial growth on this one. I think we could almost count on it.
For Kishu Inu, you can count on financial growth.
I think this one I pretty much like.
Do you think that if a chart, let's say heart-centered, like what you've put...
Yeah, that's what I'm getting here.
If
There's a lot of harmony in this one.
Do you feel like if they embrace what the chart is, the influence of the chart, rather than resist going against that, do you feel...
I don't know if people have a choice. It's sort of like you can't really fight gravity. My joke is when people say they don't believe in astrology, I say, and gravity doesn't believe in you either.
You're saying this is the direction. You're saying this is the direction it's going in.
It looks like it.
Yeah.
So another positive here is again, the Mercury does square Pluto, which is that secrecy thing, but Mercury's 26 Aries, perfectly sextile. That's half the trine. The Star of David, which is the 2 overlapping triangles, those are 60-degree angles. 6 times 60 is 360. Everything in astrology is based on sacred geometry, and that's another harmonic. It's not as strong as the trine, but it's beneficial. So we have the Mercury, ruler of trade, in the 11th house of altruistic goals, favoring Mars, rising in Gemini, the sign of marketing and mercantilism. It has, I would say, 80% is positive in this chart.
That's very interesting because I think that people, when they talk about this one, they just feel good about it.
That's the hard thing. Isn't that funny?
and that's why that's a big reason why they invest in it, because they just like it.
It will have some shocks too, because again, anything born in the last 2 years has had Uranus Taurus squaring Saturn Aquarius. Well, the last year put that, because Saturn just went into Aquarius in December of last year. It's not quite a year. This one does have Uranus square Saturn, so I think it's going to be like, it'll move ahead 2 steps and maybe get pushed back 1. There'll be a little jerky movement, but essentially, I didn't find anything here that raised any real alarm bells for me.
Does it have that ability to go forward through the years? Does it have that steadfastness to it?
When Jupiter goes into Pisces, which will be next year, it's going to favor Uranus. It's going to favor the moon on the chart, which I think is going to attract investors. If it attracts investors, does that make it go up? What makes something go up? Yes?
Demand will make it go
all right.
up.
I don't know how these things work. January 2022 looks good because the moon is the public and the public's reaction, and Jupiter is the money planet going into Pisces. So anyway, the Jupiter is going to favor the moon. That's basically it'll happen 4 times in 12 years. So the one coming up is going to be January 2022. That's 3-4 months from now. Or is it 5 months? And then when Jupiter goes further into Pisces, it will favor Uranus, which is the planet of surprises. Uranus could be positive shocks, not just the negative kind. And that's the first 10 days of February of 2022. It's going to favor the Venus, which is the money planet. That's mid-January 2022. Yeah, I see some growth here next year.
So you're looking at 2022 for growth for Kishu.
Yeah, I think
so now
I do.
would be a good time to start stockpiling Kishu, everyone. If you, if you
I guess
like
so.
a
I don't know how that.
heart-centered
So the
coin.
price is lower and then it goes up. That's how that works, like
Well,
a stock.
Yeah, right now it's well under a penny. So
I want to get some.
Yeah.
I want my Christmas toy.
we're gonna get you some, girl.
Yeah. With that, I mean, I remember these kooks with the penny stocks that became worth something. You never
Yeah.
really know.
A lot of these are under pennies that you're reading.
Wow, that's excellent.
Yeah.
So,
So-
what did we leave out? Metamoon?
Metamoon is next, yeah.
This one I got a real sense of literal investment in land and mining and real estate. It has a hell of a lot of Taurus. And Taurus is tangible. Taurus wants to feel it, eat it, touch it. The moon is in Taurus, which is show me the money. It's very tangible. The moon is near Uranus, so this one's not going to be for the faint-hearted, because the moon is basically the public's pulse, the public's appetite, where it's wanting, and Uranus is the very synaptic planet. It rules electricity, sudden surges, sudden negative, sudden surge, sudden negative. That's what I mean, like a roller coaster ride. The sun is in Taurus, and the sun in Taurus, here's a good one. It favors Pluto, and Pluto is the planet of power, including the power of transformation. So when the sun, Taurus, rooted in the earth, favors Pluto, I see long-term growth on this one too. Now, it's wide. It's a wide square. Astrologers say the closer an exact aspect, so 90 degrees is, 3 signs away, the tighter the conflict. In this case, the sun is at almost 20 Taurus, and Saturn is at 13 Aquarius, so the spread is 83 degrees. Or 97. It's 7 degrees off from a perfect square. We would still say it's squared, though. It's just weakening. It's like waning, but it's still a square. What that means is patience, Garth. When you have anything to do with Saturn, and this chart, like most of the others, does have the Uranus-Taurus squaring the Saturn-Aquarius because they're born around the same time, and the outer planets take 2-3 years plus to move through a sign. So if the inception happens the same year, they're all going to have that pattern. So I think all of them except one has the Saturn square Uranus, which means it's a jerky rhythm. It's jerky because Saturn is the goat trying to get to the top of the mountain, say, I'm here, I plant my flag at the summit. And Uranus says, not so fast, Jack. There's going to be up and downs. There's going to be some interruptions, some synapses to the progress. But maybe with something this cutting edge, that's inevitable. Now, the 5th house in any chart represents speculation. So if somebody were into the stock market, that would be 5th house. I think these cryptos may fall under that. So this one for Metamoon does have Neptune, which is the planet of the 2 fish. One is profoundly imaginative, potentially compassionate. The other side of that coin is deception, fraud in the 5th house. But to me, this is wishing on a star stuff too. There's a certain amount of imagination and potential for deception in any of these, but that's true of today's money system too.
Well, I mean, everybody has the potential to get it hacked and stolen from as well.
Oh, I forgot about
there's
that.
Okay.
So it's got the 3 planets in Taurus, which is really grounded and looks good for planting the seed and watching it grow over time. The Neptune Pisces, and that's the planet of deception, happens to favor the sun. So that's somewhat of a mitigation of the negative possibilities, because when 2 planets favor each other, it tends to bring out the best in both of them. And so the sun, Taurus, wants to grow, and Neptune is saying, my imagination, my compassion will feed that prospect. It looks like very strong partners, people with big money getting involved in this one. And then the 8th house, which is other people's money, taxes, debts, loans, inheritances, any joint investment, has Mercury, which is the planet of commerce and investment and marketing and mercantilism, as well as Venus. And Venus rules money, plus Venus rules the chart, because if I have the correct birth time, it's 28 degrees Libra rising. The ruler of Libra is Venus. We find Venus in the 8th house of everybody's joint collective assets. So that looks like it's going to really attract I think it's going to attract a lot of people.
Cool. So this project is an NFT Marketplace.
I have no idea what that is.
All right. So NFTs are non-fungible tokens,
What the heck
are
is that?
right. So they can be unique properties. You mentioned real estate. So you could wrap your house deed as an NFT and put it on the marketplace.
But then you lose your own house,
yeah,
right?
you could, sure, you could, or you could use it as collateral. You could leverage it.
Boy, that's a scary game right there. You could do that. Really does fit that Uranus thing.
But you can do your artwork if you're trying to unload your.
Yeah, I like it for artists, and actually Venus rules artists, and that's in the 8th house. I could see where artists would get funding, and Mercury's education too.
Music,
so I could see where
art.
people that were looking for educational backing might come up with something here. I think there's a lot of potential here for innovation because Mercury is the student of life. It's in its own sign of education in the 8th house of other people's money. So I think this one is going to move in some unique directions. By the way, the North Node is there too. The North Node is almost like Jupiter. I like to use the metaphor of the ancient navigators using the North Star to find their way to the so-called New World. So the North Node is like where the chart is pivoted for ultimate growth and satisfaction, not just on a material level, like soul satisfaction. And Mercury, which is mercantilism, as well as education and trades and commerce, is smack on that North Node. They're both at 10, 11 degrees Gemini in the 8th house of other people's money. So yeah, I see creative resource use in this one. The Mars is in Cancer, which also favors the Taurus planets, and the Taurus is where the money is.
So we'll just think of NFTs as properties. So this is what they are. They are creating a marketplace for that kind of inventory. Tangible intangibles.
Yeah, this is very imaginative. That fits Gemini because it's the two twins. One is here's the physical stuff, and the other is, well, I have this idea, or I have this paper, or I have this deed, or I have this art project.
Babe Ruth trading card.
Oh, wow. This is going to make it on
Marvel Comics.
This looks good. I'm not getting any major affliction, keyword in astrology. As a matter of fact, with a little bit of, I could almost say that Pluto trines the Venus. They're out of sign. The Pluto is at the end of Capricorn, almost 27 Capricorn. If it was at 0, 1 Aquarius, it would trine the Venus exactly at 1 Gemini, but it's within the mathematics. It's 124 degrees. 120 is a trine. We give it a few degrees either way. What does that mean? Well, Pluto is power, the power of transformation, and Venus basically is all your tangibles and money. And yeah, I think this one has a lot of potential too. The numerology on this one, I could do it two ways. One is the Wanderer, 56 in the I Ching, the Wanderer. So maybe that gives it a global scope, and it's going to move around a lot. It's going to always be searching for, new territory to claim or conquer. This one I get a good vibe on. In fact, I wrote on my red lettering, real potential. I put my gut reactions, which is how I love to read charts. The first time, whenever I do a reading for somebody, I say, don't tell me anything. Let me just come in clean and cold. And then afterwards, I'll let you ask questions and tell me about your story.
Can you do what you did with Kishu? Can you look at 2021, 2022 for
Kyushu one?
I mean, for METAMOON. You've already done Kishu.
Oh, METAMOON.
So METAMOON,
it's going to have a little bit of twists and turns coming. Okay, it has a little bit of a built-in balance. Okay, if a table has an extra leg, you kick out a leg, it's got a reason to stand up. What I'm saying in English is, the Venus, I'm going to round it out to 2 Gemini. The Moon is, let's round it out to 4, but it's really closer to 5 Taurus. What it's saying is if something afflicts the Venus, it'll favor the Moon. And that's what's coming. When Jupiter goes in Pisces, it squares the Venus. That's going to be really complicated to this thing. I don't know if it's going to grow fast and have difficulty tracking something. It's going to have some logistical issues coming up in January.
METAMOON.
Yep, that's the one. But then it stabilizes and has better growth potentials once Jupiter gets a little deeper into Pisces. So the beginning of January is real major flux. Anywhere from January 17 on looks good because then Jupiter favors the Moon. That calms the public. When Jupiter favors Uranus, we consider that very lucky. And that's around February 13 to 22. Eventually, Jupiter will favor the Neptune. That's the thing that enhances compassion, imagination, intuition. That's the end of March and early April. Okay, when Saturn squares the Sun, there's going to be a problem. Let me get that date. See, Saturn is always basically the party pooper. Is that the right word?
Time to get to work.
Yeah, but when Saturn is a square, which is the hardest angle in astrology, it's a roadblock. Is there some legal thing that could come up on that one?
Any one of these could hit legal.
Okay, so the issue with Saturn, the timing on that is going to be, I'm going to say the last few days of February till about March 12 of 2022. And then Saturn continues on its merry voyage. It won't be bothering for a while. The problem is it's going to go retrograde. And when a planet goes retrograde, unfortunately, it returns to that same space. Typically, it means the issue raised on the first attack or challenge, comes back again. It hasn't been resolved. So the second hit of the Saturn square, and by the way, Saturn's orbit is about a little under 29 years. If we say 28, a square comes every 14 years. So it's not something that's, every year. This is a major one. The second hit comes from, I'm going to say, September 10 of 2022, should be dissolved by the 1st of October 2022. But then it has to come forward again. This is the last hit. There's usually 3. With Pluto and Neptune, you can get 5 or 6 of these retros and turnarounds. But with Saturn, it's usually just the 2, 3. So the next time this comes up would be about November 15 to December 17 of 2022. At those times, when Saturn is in those degrees of Aquarius, it won't be getting any support from anything else in this chart. So those are going to be the challenges to this particular system.
You were talking about partnerships in the houses there. Did you see where those partnerships might come in 2021 or 2022?
Well, I like the surge coming in the first 2-3 months.
I
the
see.
Saturn square, a lot of times Saturn does mean something legal or involving an authority figure or a government official. So it may come down to something logistical with one of those entities.
Could it possibly be hacking issues, technological issues, or Saturn is...
Yes, anything that feels like a roadblock. Saturn could be anything that feels like a roadblock.
So it could be coding issues, technical issues.
That's out of my cosmic ballpark. But, the cool thing about astrology is, like, I'll always say to somebody, I don't know if Saturn means you're going to lose your job or break a bone. All I know is it's going to stop you in your tracks.
Okay.
And, that's the thing. I mean, with the tarot cards, we get a very different, it's kind of like a gestalt. So we see the pictures, and sometimes that makes it more precise. But I don't like using tarot on things like this. People do, but I don't trust them.
Yeah.
Yeah, I got to say, I mean, I would still invest in it, but I think there's going to be some roadblock, and it's probably temporary, and it could get people to tweak things a little stronger. Like the Kishu Inu one, Saturn is 12 degrees of Aquarius, and right now, I don't think Saturn goes back to that degree. I think that one's out of the woods. It's the later degrees. Okay, wait a second. I'm wrong. Saturn will be at 12 degrees in January 2022. It's not as harsh, and it's not involving Uranus. They already dealt with Uranus for the most part on that one.
So can we go to XYO, SHIBA, and SAFEMOON and do...
let's one at a time though. XYO?
Yeah.
Okay, where am I? Here it is. Okay, what am I looking for the next year?
Yeah.
I got a big heavy. Remember I said Mars and Jupiter at 17 degrees Scorpio, the two of them? Yeah. When Uranus gets to 17 Taurus, that'll be the 8th house of investors opposite the 2nd house of money making. There's going to be a major shock. I don't see that as an easy shock. I'll tell you when it is. Viewers beware. I got to open my ephemeris, my book of time, to find the right dates. Okay, it's not this year. It's going to be in 2022. Hold on, horses. It could come in the beginning of June, but it's really strong from about June 12, 2022 till about July 10, 2022. Now, that doesn't mean that when Uranus passes that 17th degree that you're out of the woods, because guess what? It's going to go retrograde. So it's going to come back over it. And the second hit will be around October 14, 2022, holding till, I would say, about November 23, 2022. And, these borders are really loose because the planet doesn't necessarily stop when it's off the degree. We astrologers a lot of times give a 3-degree approach for flux to start happening. And then the last one, in other words, if you feel it ahead of schedule, jump if your intuition tells you, is going to be April of 2023. So we got a little bit of timing on this. This one is going to have some shocks.
So can you look at it and see what potential financial upswing might it have this year?
Well, that's the thing, is that it's got some help because we have 6 different planets around similar degrees. So that's why I'm saying astrology is complicated. The moon is around 13 Virgo. Okay, Virgo's Earth. Earth and water go together. The Mars, Jupiter around 17 Scorpio. 13, 17 are only 4 degrees separation. And then we go to those Capricorn planets, and they're right in the middle between 13 and 17. We got the Venus at 15 Capricorn, the Sun at 15, 16 Capricorn, the Pluto at 18 Capricorn. So energy goes from 13 to 18 degrees of water and earth signs. when Uranus is at 17 degrees Taurus, opposing the Mars-Jupiter, it's not having a problem with these other planets. So I think what it's saying is there'll be shocks, but people are going to stick with it and hang on for the longer growth potential. Because the truth is that when Uranus is not exactly, because 17 degrees is 2 degrees away from 15, but Uranus is going to favor the Venus-Sun. I think money comes in on that one. Something positive comes in on that one. Let me give you the dates. People just have to write the dates down. They're not all precise. Well, they're precise, but they're based on several variables. That's where the complexity comes into play. Uranus will get to the 15th degree, favoring the Sun and the Venus, which do attract. Those are positives. This is going to be in the total month of May 2022. Okay, remember the flux comes later in June and July. Does Uranus go back to 15 degrees? Yes. So this is a second monetary upswing. This is December 22, a little weaker, but still at play in January 2023, strong again in February 2023, and then the negative flux or the hard flux comes again by April 2023. So that's going to be quite the roller coaster that year. This chart has certain protections, though, because that Virgo moon is working with those Capricorn planets, which is saying nothing shall defeat thee, Macbeth. You know, it's got a lot of strength. The sun and the moon, when the sun and the moon get together, that's like the quintessential yin and yang. So the chart has a good marriage of the archetypes in earth signs, but Taurus is the missing link. Taurus is where Uranus, the maverick, is currently transiting for the next few years. It's going to be real hard on that Mars-Jupiter. Jupiter is the money planet in the second house. It's going to be a real feeling of gambling on that when Uranus goes opposite it. But it does favor the Sun and the Venus and the Moon and later the Pluto. Interestingly enough, the Pluto's later, 18, 19, Capricorn. So that's kind of like the Phoenix rising planet. So after the wreckage of the Uranus opposing the Mars-Jupiter, that's the 17-degree one, Uranus makes it to that 19th degree, 18, 19 degree, and that's where the resurrection takes place. And I think this is going to prove true. All right, let me give you resurrection dates. I usually don't like to read more than a year into the future. That would be May of 2023. So this is going to be, people have to have a strong stomach, ride a roller coaster if they want to stick with this one. But I think by the spring of 2023, the wreckage will clear and you'll know where it's safe and productive and potentially prosperous to rebuild.
And this is XYO that we're
reading. Yeah, it's XYO, plus the fact that Mars and Jupiter happen to be in the sign of Scorpio, which is ruled by Pluto, which is the principle of life, death, rebirth, does imply endings and rebirth as part of the growth paradigm for this particular entity.
Right. Okay, so let's go to SHIBA. Can we do the same thing? Partnerships, any issues to look out for, and any financial possible upswing for the year?
Okay, SHIBA, where I said lots of conflicts in this chart. Well, the Jupiter going into Pisces is going to favor those 4 Capricorn planets. And it starts with the moon in early degrees, 3-4 degrees Capricorn, which is going to be January of 2022. So that's going to be a first positive energy. When you add water to earth, seeds grow. That's the premise here. So I see growth beginning when the Jupiter does go in Pisces, because Pisces is a water sign. This chart is heavy on earth. It's got 5 out of 10 planets in earth signs. And so the water of Jupiter Pisces nourishes the earth. It allows the seeds to grow. So the first of those planets is the moon at 3-4 degrees. And then there's a big jump. And the next earth planet would be the Uranus at about 10-11 degrees of Taurus. And a good Jupiter-Uranus does usually mean a lucky bolt out of the blue. Something usually comes that's positive and helpful. And this is showing up, we're going to have, let's see, that'll be in mid-February of 2022. So the beginning of the year looks good for this one. When Jupiter gets to about 22 degrees, we've got the Jupiter at 20 Capricorn, the Pluto at 23 Capricorn, the Saturn at almost 28 Capricorn, and then the Mercury at 22 Cancer. Those are the planets in the 22 area of the zodiac. So when Jupiter gets to about 22 degrees, it's going to be bouncing off this opposition. This is the opposition that I said does look like internal conflict and potentially a conflict of a legal nature. And this energy will come in, that's going to be April, like late March, April 2022. What were you saying?
Could the conflict also be code-based? Or
yes, it definitely could be code-based because Mercury represents languages. written languages, and there's a conflict here.
So there's could potentially be.
I think there's going to be a
coding.
copyright violation, some claim issue. Who owns what?
Nobody owns Bitcoin. Nobody owns Ethereum.
Okay, another reason why Sue Rose sees conflict here is if you look at that opposition, which is think of a line in space. It's like two kids pulling on opposite sides of a jump rope or a rope, tug of war, straight up the middle, which is the square. That's 90 degrees. That's the hardest angle in astrology, is Mars and Aries. Mars rules Aries. That's a sign of fighting. That's a sign of my turf. It's mine.
So it could be internal conflict.
Yeah. Yeah.
So,
and I think the boss, you said there's no boss, but the 10th house does mean authority figures, and Mars is there. Somebody's going to act like the policeman. Mars is the warrior, the policeman, the armed guard.
Well, the development team can have issue with each other.
Very likely. And then another problem I had in that chart is that the Neptune, which is the planet of either high compassion or deception, squares, again, the toughest angle in astrology, Venus, which is the money. Venus rules the tangible assets. So there's potential for conflict there. This one has some trippy stuff coming up. And I think when Jupiter's in Pisces activating about 5 or 6 of the planets caught up in this little, tug of war, so to speak, a lot's going to have to be ironed out.
That's very interesting. And so for the year 2021, you don't see any financial upswing that's obvious.
Let me see if anything jumps up at me. See, the thing is, when Saturn gets to 23, 24 degrees of Aquarius, that's not this year, it will favor the Venus. That's where this more like a solidity, something solid around investment. Saturn means long-term growth. It will be there. This may help to be a mitigating force against all those negatives I was just talking about. As a matter of fact, this one would come in April of 2022. People that are serious investors, watch what goes on in April 22, because that's the best mitigation against these oppositions I was talking about. And Saturn will go retrograde, crossing that point again in mid-July 2022, and then forward for the first 2 weeks of January 2023. Those are the most solid periods.
So that's potentially when partnerships could come in, investment could come in to adopt this project into something else.
I still see conflict here. And here's the thing. When you have built-in squares in a chart, every 7 years, Saturn's going to activate them. Every 3 or 4, Jupiter will, although Jupiter is more benign. And then the heavyweights like, Uranus, Neptune, and Pluto can also act on them. The less squares in a chart, the greater the flow. This one has a lot of squares. There's always going to be issues among the people involved. And, this is another one because there are planets. Well, Capricorn makes that less so. This would be more like, giving rise to a rival group as opposed to split mitosis, like a breakaway of a kind of rebel group.
So, interesting. So it's possible for projects to split, and so
I think so. And then on the I Ching on this one, it's 49 revolution, and that's when I have a client who's got that number. You think of the number 4, it makes like the 4 lines in space a box. That's the part that wants the slow, steady, don't do anything risky. But the 9 is kind of like Sagittarius. I want to see the world and explore and gamble. So there's like a built-in conflict between the more conservative, hold the box, versus the number 9 types within the energy here that say, let's just break away and expand.
It'll be very interesting to see what happens with this project.
Yeah.
It's very, very popular. It's hugely popular. So all kinds of people are involved in it.
And which one was this one again?
This is SHIBA.
But what does it do again?
Well, right now it's an exchange, a swap, just like MetaMoon.
Oh, right. Well, the best thing about it is intuition.
But
intuition.
it's striving to become its own entity, which means it will become part of the infrastructure of the blockchain. Just like Bitcoin
Yeah, but this is the one I wrote. Lots of conflicts in this chart. I see legal battles, government control, imposition on this one.
Also, legal battles can be code battles.
It could easily be right because I don't think in that language. So you're totally right about that.
And that's very valid in this particular space. Okay, so what about our last one? Would be the SAFEMOON, same read.
The one I like. Let's see. What's the first good thing? When Jupiter gets to 26 degrees of Pisces, that's up the road, it's going to favor the Pluto. That'll bring in some real growth financially, I think, because Pluto does rule other people's money, and Jupiter is the planet of abundance. I turned right to the page. That's an omen of agreement. Late April, early May 2022. Let's see. Okay, I got one issue coming up. When Uranus gets to 13, 14 Taurus, I'll give the dates in a moment, it's going to square, remember squares are the hard one, the Mercury Jupiter. I wonder if this could be some sneaky bad press. Something of like a nefarious trying to, make people...
A competitor.
Yeah, because Mercury is perception. And in this chart, Mercury is with Jupiter, which is lucky. But here comes Uranus throwing a square, a monkey wrench. Okay, let me get the date on that one. It'll be 13 to 16 degrees of Taurus. Well, if we go with the 13 degree, it's this year. That would be around Christmas time. No, I'm sorry, wrong. April, May of 2022. There might be a flux here to communication or the perception around it. But again, because Mercury could represent things like, how things are published, how things are written. The Jupiter Pisces totally favors this. It's going to go over the Venus and the Sun. That's really, really good for... Remember, it has 5 planets in the money house. Some are in Aquarius and some are in Pisces. So there's, different energy on each one. Like a moon, it's going to have fluxes. But the Jupiter going over the Venus and the Sun looks like a real push of growth on that financial. And that's in January, February. It's possible there'll be somebody who's going to get jealous. See, this one has that built-in trine. It's like, this is really long-term protection
as well, right?
Yeah, it really is. And when Jupiter gets to like 23 to 27 degrees of Pisces, it hits that trine. And that's like when I said that phrase from Shakespeare, nothing shall defeat thee, Macbeth. That's April, May of 2022.
So in 2021, any upswing for financial that you might see?
Okay, so Mars is going to go to 27 degrees Virgo. And basically, it's an Earth thing. Mars is not known for peace or stability, though, but it can bring a lot of energy. This is when I see hurricane season kicking up. Yeah, so Mars is going to hit 23 degrees going over the moon. There may be some issues among personnel, or public perception. That's the first couple of days of September. But then Mars hits the trine. It hits its own, it trines itself in Taurus, and it trines Pluto. That's nice. That's like September 5 to 12 of 2021. Generally, we look at the outer planets. I don't have the time to check every eclipse Mercury's going to go retrograde. Mercury retrograde is always tricky for anything. It affects the stock market a lot. So the next Mercury retrograde is going to be from September 27, okay, that's after the good period here, to October 19. And when Mars goes into Libra, it's going to square the Grand Trine. It's going to square the Pluto in the Grand Trine. But that's actually violence. Mars square Pluto is violent. But I don't think that would affect something like this. But, it's a rough aspect. But it would be October 22 to October 28.
Can violence include hacking attempts or attacks against your code base?
I think this one's pretty protected. That North Node in Gemini in the 6th house looks like if they serve the higher goals here, there's a lot of protection on this chart. And I think I wrote that down.
Yeah.
This one, it says roller coaster, some gains, but basically it's going to have a lot of protection. And the I Ching being progress.
First of all,
listen, I want to wish God bless and may the stars be with you to everybody out there.
Well, I want to say I'm really impressed with that read. Like, that's a really
For somebody
great...
who's blind on the subject.
No, but it's so
I'm
good.
the
Like,
Stevie
the depth,
Wonder of this.
But the depth of understanding, that people can understand the depth of the influence of whatever asset they're involved in. I mean, that's it's good to know. And you also gave some great, pitfalls to look out for, some highlights to look forward to that people can write down.
I hope they do.
And I think that people are going to enjoy this very much, and they'll show their appreciation by liking your podcast and your video.
So. This brings a new awareness. That's what we're looking for. Uranus lifting the awareness out of flatlands. That's a great story where people live in a world where they can only look left and right. They're two-dimensional. Nobody thinks about climbing out of it. But the third dimension is lifting out of the old paradigm, and that's where Uranus, the new ways of looking at the world, everything from money to education to the way we look at healthcare, sharing, how we use the resources of the planet in a co-creative way, all of that. We're at the beginning of the Aquarian age, and we are in a paradigm shift.
Awesome. Well, and I also want to say too, congratulations, because your website is launching very soon, and that's SueRoseAstrology.com, and it's great. You can book with her, and you can get free astrology monthly reports you're writing.
Yes, I'm going to write horoscopes.
That is very generous. I know that's a lot of work to do.
I used to be a top New York Magazine horoscope writer in my earlier days of the career before everything became consolidated or free online internet content.
Well, now you're going to be your own platform, which
Yep.
is very
And thank you
very
again,
exciting.
Candace.
Okay, everybody. So have a wonderful day.